wokeness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media
and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, the Hamilton Corner.
Good evening. Welcome to the Hamilton Corner here on American Family Radio. I'm your host, Abraham Hamilton III, and we have made it to the end of the week. Most of you are making your way from your part-time jobs to your full-time jobs, and in making that transition, let me encourage you that as you make that move, do so with full intentionality, recognizing that the Lord has blessed you if you have the glorious privilege of being married and having young children in your home. The Lord has blessed you to be able to serve him within the context of family. If you are blessed at this point and you are not yet married and do not yet have children, you nevertheless are equally as called to spend yourself in executing the Great Commission. But I want to take this moment to focus on serving the Lord within the context of our families. If you are moving in that direction in your own life, you're not quite there yet. My encouragement to you is to begin to develop a biblical view of the family. I know, and I'm gonna work this backwards, not backwards, but from the outside in. I'll say it that way. There is a demonic, deceptive ideology that is attempting to make its way into the Lord's church, to where people are saying that, oh, well, you guys are making idols out of your family. Family is becoming an idol in the church. Let's pump the brakes for a second. Anything that's good can become an idol. You can make an idol out of food. You can make an idol out of your children. You can make an idol out of your job. You can make an idol out of preaching. So let's be clear. Anything that's good can be made into an idol. Just because something can be made into an idol doesn't mean we shouldn't seek to have God's view on the matter. The reason why I focus on family as much as I do is I believe it's critically important to offer the God-breathed antidote to the absolute cancer that is being spewed out by our society. In the world, family, and especially children, are viewed as a burden. Children are viewed as an impediment to pursuing the American dream. Family is considered, especially just recently we had what's her name? Kirsten Gillibrand getting a tete with Joe Biden on the debate stage. So whether or not, do you think I'm not a good person because I'm a primary breadwinner? And of course, I don't know what Joe Biden wrote 55 years ago, but let's be honest. What is communicated through this era of political correctness and feminism and intersectionality and all of these various isms and schisms and rhythms and whatever you want to call it? A woman is not really a woman unless she's equal to a man, identical to a man, unless she is doing the exact same thing that a man is doing. Folks, that counters what we know from Scripture. Men and women are equal in quality before the Lord. No doubt about it. That's why he said, in our image, he made them both male and female. But this same God who made men and women equivalent qualitatively also made them distinct. Men and women are not identical. Men and women are not interchangeable parts. The world will want you to believe that, but that's not what the Word of God teaches. And so I focus on family. Because one, I'm convicted by the Lord that in many ways the church has allowed the world to dictate terms to us, to where we find ourselves to be, or we evaluate ourselves as being less than, unless we are parroting what the world is saying. Man, bump that. As I've been saying all week, there's no such thing as a trendy Christ follower. We've been called to swim upstream. That's what we do. That's what it means to be a peculiar people. That means they're going to think you're odd. Guess what? So be it. So be it. Man, family is a blessing. Serving a family is a privilege. It is a ministerial privilege. There's an old time saying, he that rocks the cradle rules the world. That's kind of putting a little bit of carnal things in it, but the principle is there. Shaping the hearts, minds, convictions, morals, intelligence, spirituality of young children is what sets the course for the future leadership in the world. That's a fact. And the thing that's so crazy is that the world understands this. I did a show this week talking about quotes from the 1930s and a 113-year plan that said, listen, we want to focus on the children. Hitler understood it. That's why he created the Hitler Youth. Aristotle understood it. The only ones who seem to wax ignorant on these issues seem to be folks that make up the Lord's church. So I simply want to offer a reversal of that. I think the most fundamental component of discipling children has to happen in the home. The most fundamental component of that, the most foundational component of that, of course, is salvation. But the next thing on top of salvation is making sure our children see us husbands loving our wives as Christ loved the church. To make sure our children see our wives loving and respecting our husbands as submitting unto our husbands as unto the Lord. The way that we interact with one another within the marital union is the first and foundational instruction that's offered to this next generation. I believe that. And then we build from there. Let's reject the world's ideology, man, and stand firmly on what God has called us to and conveyed to us in his word. Praise God. Well, you can tell I'm already warm. Today we're going to turn to Psalm chapter 127 and just delve into 2 verses. Since we're already on being countercultural, I mean, literally, that's endemic to Christianity. You know, that's like, you know, the fundamental building block of humanity's DNA. Well, the DNA of Christianity built on the foundation of the sinless life, the virgin birth, the sinless life, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Intrinsic to embracing the Christian faith is embracing the idea that swimming upstream is what we do. That's not what we visit. That is what we do. All right. Since we're already there, Psalm 127, it's important to note that this is a psalm written by Solomon. A psalm written by Solomon, the second king of the unified Israel, the son of King David. In addition to Solomon being the one who wrote this psalm, the timing of him writing the psalm is also instructive. King Solomon reportedly wrote this psalm, as David's reign was coming to an end and Solomon was approaching his era as king of Israel. It's important to take note of that because that will cause this text to even stand out even further from us. And not only was it at the time when Solomon was approaching his entree into the kingship in Israel, but he also was making his way to the kingship with the mandate of building the temple, making the transition from the era where the transitory tabernacle existed. David wanted to build the temple. The Lord said, nope, you're a man of war. Your hands are full of blood. You are not the one to build it. Your son Solomon will build the temple. So Solomon is coming to the throne with the understanding that one of the first major tasks he has, the first major capital program or project that he has to pursue is the erection of the Lord's temple. And Solomon wrote this. I'm just going to go into the first 2 verses and spend some time on those. Verse 1, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Now, right off the bat, it should immediately stand out. Unless the Lord builds a house, those who build it labor in vain. The immediate house that's before Solomon is the building of the Lord's temple. So what is Solomon conveying there? It's not enough to have the plan and the idea. In order to have a true construction of the Lord, it requires that the Lord is intimately involved, not only in the giving of the plan, but in the executing of the plan. Now, it doesn't mean that men can't build things. I mean, the example I like to refer to is the Tower of Babel. You know, men can do some things. Men can build some edifices. But the question is, are we constructing in accordance with the Lord's will? See, the issue at the Tower of Babel was not that mankind didn't have the ability to build things. The Lord himself said, man, they can do anything they put their minds to. The issue was that they were building in rebellion. The rhetorical question I want to present to us today is, what are you building? Why are you building? And for whom are you building it? Is the construction of your hands the product of the Lord building your house? Or are you constructing in rebellion? What has God required of you? What has God burned into you? Are you building in accordance with his will? Or are you building a rebellion? Then look what Solomon says next. Then look at what Solomon says next. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. Now you see a progression in Solomon's writing from building the house to now a city. Going from an individual construct now to a cosmopolitan city, if you will. So you're making the transition from an individual construction project now having an expanded city. But Solomon reiterates the same principle. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. You see, the very same thing it took for you to construct initially in accordance with the Lord's will is what it's going to take to be sustained as the Lord expands you or increases you. As we talked about yesterday, pride precedes the fall. One of the most harrowing warnings all throughout Scripture is, when he was small in his own eyes. When he was small in his own eyes, King Uzziah, in 1 Chronicles 26, I believe, or 6, he said that when he became strong, it's not that he was weak before, but he began to see himself as being strong. King Uzziah violated the division between the temple and the kingship and the monarchy. As you have initiated the construction as unto the Lord, the question then becomes, are you maintaining that fidelity, that faithfulness to the Lord? Because what often happens as a product of the human condition is once we have some modicum of success initially, we begin to start feeling ourselves a little bit. We start to walk with a different strut. You were strolling, now you want to dip with that thing. You want to dip a little bit now because, you're a big and bad boy. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. One of the most foolish things we could ever do is to think that an expansion of the attention of men should grant us license to abandon our dependency upon the Lord. That's traversing into the territory of foolery. Unless the Lord watches the city. Yes, the house was constructed, but unless the Lord watches the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. Now, in order to watch the city, to serve kind of like as the patrol of the city to make sure there are no threats coming in and all of that, of course, the watchman needs to stay awake. But Solomon is saying, unless the Lord is involved in the watching, unless the dependence and reliance upon the Lord is intrinsic to the watching, you can stay awake all you want. All you want. But you'll lose. That's the lesson of the Israelites following the Battle of Jericho. Jericho was the largest city in Canaan. As soon as they crossed the Jordan River, the first thing that the Israelites under Joshua's command had to do, take the biggest city, the most technologically advanced, the one with these huge walls. And those walls came down. But then the next battle was the smallest city in the Canaan territory, Ai. Joshua was like, just send a few soldiers. And the Israelites got whooped because of this principle. Unless the Lord watches over the city. Psalm 33. A king isn't delivered by the size of his horses or his chariots. We as Christ followers have to understand that fleshly means are just that, fleshly means. That we never allow ourselves to be deceived into thinking that we got it all going on enough where we will handle it all on our own. There must be a perpetual reliance and dependence on the Lord. And then lastly, it is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives his beloved sleep. The world will tell you, if you really want to make it in this world, you need to burn the candles at both ends. Of course, there's a principle in Scripture about diligence. The Lord frowns upon laziness. In fact, laziness is sinful. But human effort alone isn't what it will take to accomplish the Lord's will. Eating the bread of anxious toil. Gotta figure it, gotta make it work. Man, rest is a portion of the Lord's covenant with us, let us remain reliant upon the Lord.
Shining light into the darkness. This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner here on American Family Radio. Yesterday I promised, well, I didn't promise, but I hoped to get to this. I guess today's show is going to be more like the stuff I didn't get to all during the week because I have all kind of things that I prepared that I just run out of clock. And that clock is so disrespectful, I tell you. But yesterday I mentioned I wanted to talk about this issue just this week. The Republican Party basically, let me be more specific. Republican senators primarily, basically just repealed the entire legacy of the Tea Party in one fell swoop this week. Now, I know a lot of attention, including me. I was focusing on the debates and a lot of other things, but there were lots of things going on that Congress rushed to reach a budget deal prior to the August recess. And I want to spend some time talking about this because it is my contention that there is no such thing as a fiscally conservative party, major national conservative political party in America any longer. For the longest, we, including myself, understood the Democrat Party to be the party of uncontrolled spending, and the Republican Party was the party of fiscal conservatism. And many of you have adhered to that. This, what I'm about to talk about, is one among numerous reasons why I am personally not a Republican. I'm conservative, absolutely. Constitutionalist, no doubt about it. But I have my doubts. I've long had my doubts. And this is just another example of the reality, in my opinion, that the Republican Party is no longer a conservative party. There are conservative people in the Republican Party. There are individuals who I support wholeheartedly, like Mike Johnson, who is a friend and a mentor. He's on the House Judiciary Committee. Rock star, in my opinion. He's a greater man than he is a congressman. You know, I could talk numerous individuals, but I am talking about the party. There are forces, powerful forces within the Republican Party that seek to sideline the voice of Christians. I've had callers on this program who are active in their state Republican parties who have described how they have had to fight, even being ostracized, because they refused to capitulate on the cultural trend to reject the biblical teaching concerning marriage and sexuality and identity. There's a move now with, I'm just going to be honest. One of the issues I have with Candace Owens. There's another guy, I think his name is Rob Smith. There's a move afoot. There's the dude, I've got Guy Benson. There's another one that Fox is putting front and center. There is a movement to remove opposition to same-sex marriage from being a mainstream plank within the Republican Party. Candace Owens does not object to same-sex marriage. Unless she's changed that between the last I checked. I hope she has. But as far as I understand, she does not oppose same-sex marriage. She didn't talk about it a whole lot. But because I know she knows, and the Republican Party knows, that a large contingent of their supporters are Christians, who, if they came out and made that their official position, they lose a larger portion of their support base. But with the efforts to put Guy Benson, and I shared this before with you guys on this program, I played the audio from the PragerU video. Dennis Prager is another one of those guys who does not oppose same-sex marriage. Glenn Beck is another one who does not oppose same-sex marriage. I know he declares himself to be a libertarian, but I'm just telling you, and this is one of those issues where you're going to have to make a decision. What gets top billing? Is it the Lord and his word, or is it political partisanship? That's just a decision that you're going to have to make. There's a pretty significant contingent in the Republican Party in terms of the elected officials. Hear me well. I'm not talking about those who supported them. I'm talking about elected officials a pretty significant contingent that do not oppose abortion. Had the audio. I didn't plan to talk about this today, but Rand Paul was recently given a speech where he had added an amendment to a budget bill a while back to prohibit funding for Planned Parenthood in the national budget. And he described it this way: a leader of the Republican Party in the Senate. See, the leader of the Republican Party in the Senate came to him and asked him to remove his amendment. And Rand Paul asked him why. And this leader of the Republican Party in the Senate told him, because we might win the budget fight if we get rid of your amendment. So Rand Paul said, so you mean to tell me you care more about winning a budget fight than you do about prohibiting the use of taxpayer dollars to pay for killing children? Rand Paul said this leader of the Republican Party in the Senate just smiled at him. Yeah. That stings, man. That stings me. That stings me. And Rand Paul concluded, elected officials in the Republican Party love having abortion around as a campaign issue. There's some organizations that like having abortion around as a campaigning issue or as a fundraising issue. Because if our country ever did outlaw abortion, then what would happen to those organizations and their annual budgets and their fancy offices on Capitol Hill? What would happen to those organizations? I'm not trying to step in anybody's Kool-Aid in particular, but for me, this is me. Say what you want. For me, my conviction and my conscience is held captured by the Lord's word. I'm not playing politics here. When I'm talking about don't kill the babies, I'm not playing. I'm not having a political conversation. How can we consider ourselves to be a great nation and we kill 60 million babies and allow industry to be built around that? Folks, that's wicked. Straight up, that's wicked. We have mercantilized the killing of children in the womb. That's despicable. It's disgusting. Not directly equivalent, but analogous to that phenomenon, the Republican Party has largely grown itself and has built itself as the party of fiscal conservatism. And all they had to do with this current budget fight is to hold the line on the bill they passed in 2011. In 2011, when the Republicans only controlled one branch of government. But after having all three branches of federal government, the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives before 2018, all Republicans have done under President Trump, ramp up spending, increase the deficit, and most recently here this week, they have voted to blow the doors off of budget caps. Let's get into it a little bit. Just this week, Senate Republicans and President Trump agreed to a budget deal that increased discretionary spending by 16%. This increase in spending did not include one dime for new border walls or for deportations. And President Trump gave away this leverage for free. Now, with this new deal, and this happened just this week, Wednesday, this week, the total spending binge will rise to 20% above the fiscal year 2017 levels and still will not include a dime for the border. Now, this is they reported as $22 trillion in debt. Under President Trump, the deficit has grown by $2 trillion since he's been in office. That number is far too small because it doesn't include the massive amount of unfunded liabilities. The real number is closer to $100 trillion. But nobody wants to talk real numbers because that'll scare the American people too much. So we're more comfortable talking about, $22 trillion in debt. But here are a couple of features from this budget deal that happened this week. while all of the debate was going to, and I honestly, I think that the Congress members, including Senate Republicans, not all of them, because I'm gonna name the 23 that didn't vote for the deal, but the Senate Republicans, I think they intentionally agreed to do this budget deal behind the bright lights of the Democrat presidential primary debate because they knew the primary debate would get more of the media attention. And it wouldn't be as much media attention on the budget. But here are a couple of features of this budget. Are you ready for this? This is with you now. Now, there's a 53 to 45 majority of Republicans in the Senate. So if the Republicans all voted against this deal would not see the light of day. But the Senate Republicans and President Trump wanted this deal. Here are a couple features. The debt ceiling will once again be suspended until July 31st, 2021, with zero reforms or spending cuts. Think about that. A Republican majority Senate voted for suspending the debt ceiling. No debt ceiling. Till July 31st, 2021. No cuts in spending, no reforms. This will result likely in over $2 trillion in additional debt acquired just in that time period. So between now and July 31st, 2021, and most of you are not surprised by this. We won't be talking about $22 trillion anymore. By then, we'll be talking about $24, $25 trillion. All right? And that $2 trillion is actually a conservative estimate because if Congress continues to hold the line and refuses any new supplemental or emergency spending, it'll be $2 trillion. But do you think Congress is going to refuse any supplemental or emergency spending in these next 2 years? I don't. History doesn't support that. They haven't prohibited that in the previous years. There's no factual evidence to suggest that Congress won't approve any additional supplemental or emergency spending. Let there be another hurricane. President Trump took a lot of heat saying that Puerto Rico was mismanaged. Before any of that came into news, my family, my wife is Puerto Rican. The Puerto Rican government is full of corruption. $56 billion given to Puerto Rico, which is more than was given to Texas following Hurricane Harvey. And the $56 billion is gone. There's another storm. Congress is going to pass more emergency funding. Another feature. This budget deal that was struck this week also cancels the budget caps. Removes any budget caps for the final 2 years of the Budget Control Act that applies to fiscal years 2020 and 2021. Now, all they had to do to prevent this was just to pass another clean, continuing resolution that maintains the spending trajectory that existed prior to this particular deal. But no, the Republican-led Senate agreed. And why am I focusing on the Senate? Because the Democrats have such an overwhelming majority in the House that opposition in the House of Representatives was futile. The Freedom Caucus is in the House of Representatives. I know a lot of those guys jumped up and down about this, but to be frank, they didn't have the numbers to stop it. But you know who did have the numbers to stop it? Republicans in the Senate. And the president in his veto pen. So this deal doesn't see the light of day without Republican consent. And it's amazing in this era, this is the most politically divisive time that we've ever had. It's amazing what they seem to come together and do. Can't get anything else done, but you sure can come together and get the spending done. And I'm going to get to why that it happened. I'll get to why in a second. But I'm just saying, I think fiscal responsibility is important. It's important. The total cost of erasing the spending cuts plus adding new spending will be an additional $321 billion over 2 years, the next 2 years. Now, when Republicans only had one branch of government under President Obama, they were able to establish a more fiscally responsible spending line, but not now. What Republicans accomplished with one branch of government was completely erased when their power grew. After winning back control of the Senate, that wonderful beacon of fiscal conservatism, Paul Ryan, forged a deal to bust the budget caps by a total of $80 billion in fiscal year 2016 and 2017. When Republicans won the White House, they agreed to another budget-busting bill of $296 billion for fiscal years 2018 and 2019. And now they will add another $320 billion. In other words, by simply going along with the status quo baseline, Republicans could have cut spending by $700 billion, but oh no, they didn't like that. So let's just blow the debt ceiling, blow the budget caps. Let's just go ahead and break the bank, make it rain. As I said, making this new deal, the new baseline for the next 2 years will lead to nearly $2 trillion in more spending over the next 10 years. Now, I'm going to try to put this in perspective for you, right? So considering right now that revenue to our federal coffers is $1.5 trillion more, they're $1.5 trillion more going into the federal coffers than there was in 2009 and 2010 during the Great Recession under President Obama. Yet, now think about this, yet the emerging deficits that we have now will rival the deficits we incurred under Barack Obama during the time of the Great Recession. And this is happening while the economy is booming. I don't want to hear any more complaints from these folks talking about Barack Obama spent us into oblivion. Barack Obama outspent the previous presidents put together. You know who's outspending Barack Obama? President Trump. I know some of you don't like to hear that, but I'm going to keep it real with you. There is no Great Recession occurring, yet the Republican majority Senate and a Republican president is spending more than Barack Obama. Say what you want, but the identification of the Republican Party with fiscal conservatism, in my opinion, that's a wrap. It's a done deal.
The Hamilton Quarter podcast and one-minute commentaries are available at afr.net. Back to the Hamilton Quarter on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner here at American Family Radio. You know, and look, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but y'all know, most of you listen to the program because you know I'm going to be honest with you about what's happening. But isn't it amazing? Where were all of the, the conservative media pundits railing against this budget deal? Where was all of that? How were they able to so stealthily get this accomplished? I mean, if there was something to be proud of, don't you think the Mitch McConnells of the world and the Chuck Schumers of the world and everybody would have been talking about, we had bipartisanship in this budget deal. And why was it rushed so much? I'll tell you why it was rushed. They wanted to get this deal done before the August recess because the Republican senators know that if this issue continued to lay over their heads during the August recess, their constituents would have been saying, wait a minute, you guys are going to go with another budget deal? Another one? And so they're like, nah, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. We're going to wrap this thing up, tie it into a nice little bow, and make sure this issue is done, and we're going to push it out beyond the 2020 presidential election. So the budget won't be an issue during the 2020 presidential election either. And then President Trump, he tweeted, let me share what he tweeted, because he supported the deal. He supported the deal. President Trump said about it, quote, budget deal is phenomenal. For our great military, which we do have increased spending for the military, our vets in jobs. 2-year deal gets us past the election. Go for it, Republicans. There is always plenty of time to cut. End tweet. End quote. Always plenty of time to cut, President Trump? Really? Why haven't there been any cutting so far? And I know the president didn't campaign on reining in spending. I know that. It still doesn't make it any less insane to continue to rack up debt. Very simply, a basic biblical principle is that the borrower will be a slave to the lender. We understand that in our regular lives, but our government doesn't seem to understand that. And it is true. with this agreement that raises the debt ceiling for another 2 years. It increases Pentagon spending by $22 billion to $738 billion for the next fiscal year. Do you know what else it does? It also increases non-defense spending by $27 billion to $632 billion. And so the reason why you have this stealthy agreement is because everybody's getting their spending priorities established. And I'm just saying that, you know, the era of the Republican Party fighting against big government, increased government spending, it seems like that's a dead era. That's how else do you couple this? Rand Paul said this, quote, today's vote, this was on Wednesday, today's vote was a litmus test for fiscal conservatism. Those senators who voted for an unlimited increase in the debt ceiling are not and have no right to call themselves conservatives. So America, wake up and watch the votes today. That's what Rand Paul said before the vote went down. I said I would do this. I'm going to tell you the Republican senators that voted against this. There was only 23 of them. So quick math, there were 30 Republican senators who voted for it. And there were 5 Democrat senators who voted against it. But the ultimate bill was passed in the Senate 67-28. Here are the Republicans who voted against this ridiculous spending. Tennessee's Marsha Blackburn, newly elected in 2018. Indiana's Mike Braun, newly elected. Louisiana's Senator Bill Cassidy, newly elected. Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. Texas Senator Ted Cruz. These are all Republicans who voted against this spending. Montana Senator Steve Daines. Wyoming Senator Mike Enzi. Nebraska Senator Deb Fischer. Colorado's Cory Gardner. Missouri's newly elected Josh Hawley. Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. Louisiana Senators John Kennedy. So both Louisiana senators voted against this. Good on you, Louisiana. Oklahoma Senator James Lankford. Utah Senator Mike Lee. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. Idaho Senator James Risch. Utah Senator Mitt Romney. I still don't like Mitt. Mitt Romney is terrible. I'm sorry. But he did the right thing here, so that's good. Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse. Florida Senator Rick Scott, newly elected. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis. Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey. If you did not hear me call your Republican senator's name, it is because he voted for this bill. Or he may be one of the 5 senators who weren't there. Or she may be. But I can tell you the overwhelming majority of Republican senators were there. And there were 5 Democrat senators who voted against this bill. Colorado Senator Michael Bennet, he's running for president. Delaware's Tom Carper, Minnesota's Amy Klobuchar, West Virginia's Joe Manchin, and Montana's John Tester. So both Montana senators voted against this bill. I'm just telling you, folks, I just, you know, I said it earlier this week. I don't like being played. I don't like people telling you one thing so consistently, then when they finally have the opportunity to act on what they've promised you, they come up lame. And not very many people are talking about it. So I'm going to talk about it. Next thing I want to mention. Do many of you remember the Gillette ad? It caused a little bit of a kerfuffle earlier this year. Jeff, you have the audio from that Gillette ad just to remind the listeners what I'm talking about?
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual
Toxic
harassment.
masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy?
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie.
Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Bro, not cool, not cool.
Some already are. In ways big
Yo, men,
and small.
I am strong.
But some is not enough.
It's not how we treat each other, okay?
Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
Remember that? And Gillette had a lot of backlash following that. Well, folks, I hate to inform Gillette. Well, I'm not informing them. They know about it already. But I guess it's not a good idea if you have a company that sells razors to men to insult men by saying that, well, you know, men are raging sexists and, you know, you men need to get it together. You know, I think most men are the ones who would tell you that they don't tolerate the stuff that Gillette was attempting to say that define manhood in America in their ads. Well, there's this little thing called economics. And Gillette, and I don't want to oversell this because Gillette is owned by Procter & Gamble, which is a huge behemoth of a company. And it's a hugely profitable company. But the fiscal year, the quarter that ended June 30th, resulted in Gillette in particular reporting a net loss of $5.24 billion. That loss of $5.24 billion also came with Gillette officially engaging in a corporate write-down of the value of the corporation by reducing that value $8 billion. Yeah. That comes down to the real money loss, $2.12 per share, and the $8 billion non-cash write-down of Gillette occurred at the same time period. Now, if you're not familiar with that financial terminology, a write-down means that Gillette reduced the estimated or the nominal value of its corporation. Basically, they said that we're not as valuable as we originally thought. So we have to reduce the expectation of our company's value by $8 billion. So you can go from wokeness to brokeness just like that. I guess Gillette didn't pay attention to, ESPN's downfall with their ratings when they tried to venture into wokeness. It's not a good idea if you want to sell razor blades to men to say, you know what, by the way, men, you're terrible. You're terrible. So you had lots of men who were like, you know what, I'm done with Gillette. In addition to that, at the same time that Gillette stock dropped, that it lost $5.24 billion and it suffered an $8 billion write-down, other companies, like the Dollar Shave Club and Harry's, had an expansion of their market share. Would you look at that? So it's almost like, men who shave, have these things called follicles on the face, facial follicles, and they shave and, they've decided, we'll put down the Gillette razor. We'll go buy some Dollar Shave Club. We'll go buy some Harry's. We'll go buy these other razor sources. Then, of course, you have the phenomenon where a lot of guys are growing beards these days, But it just goes to show you, man, that these people are attempting to shape cultural sentiment, to make you think what you should think, as opposed to responding to what you do think. Because masculinity is not inherently toxic, contrary to what the world would tell you in this whole feminism intersectionality movement. But now, Gillette has their pocketbooks to teach them that story, not only people like me on the radio telling you about it. Now, I want to go to this next. This is not as much a story, but I want to highlight something because a while back I did a show on the Hegelian dialectical process, and some of you may remember that show. It's based on the philosophy of George Wilhelm Hegel, who is a philosopher, whatever, and he proposed a mechanism for moving and shaping societal sentiment. He had the process that consistent of the continual application of the thesis, antithesis, and the synthesis process. The way that it would occur, and this is just a brief summary, is that in order to move the cultural needle, those agitators, those community organizers like Saul Alinsky referred to, needed to offer a thesis. That thesis would be one that the majority of the population at the time may consider to be extreme. It is a thesis that is pushing the society beyond their comfortable existent boundaries. And then that thesis would then be paired with a polar opposite antithesis. Now, the thing that needs to be remembered is that the source of the thesis and the antithesis comes from the same thought pool. So the people proposing the thesis and the synthesis, they are all working together, okay? They're working together. And then when the thesis is presented and the antithesis is presented, then you have a third offering called the synthesis or the third way. Interestingly enough, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and former Prime Minister of England Tony Blair created an organization called what? Third Way. That's straight out of the Hegelian dialectical process. And so what would occur is that the extreme thesis would be presented. The polar opposite antithesis would be presented. And then the hero coming in on his white horse like the white knight would say, gentlemen, let's be reasonable here. Let's go with this third way, which is a synthesis of both the thesis and the antithesis. So the synthesis is not fully on what the thesis proposer wanted, and it's not fully what the antithesis proposer wanted, but it's a reasonable compromise in the middle. And then you know what would happen? The same thought pool would, after the synthesis had been adopted, would pose a new thesis that's even further than a new antithesis, which is relatively close to the existing synthesis already. And so what happens when the new thesis and the new antithesis are proposed? Then another synthesis occurs. And then you have this continual movement. This is why I take little stock in people that call themselves politically they're center left or they're center right. I take little stock in that. Why? Because the center continues to move. Today's center is the left of 20 years ago. You get what I'm saying? And we witnessed this Hegelian dialectical process occur right before our very eyes with the arguments about Obamacare, right? And the dialectical process is happening right now. I want to explain this to you. Oh, man, I'm running out of time. Goodness gracious. Well, what happened with Obamacare is that really the regressives wanted single payer. Republicans opposed it. What was the synthesis? Obamacare. Now what's happening? Obamacare is terrible. So we need single payer. Not so much opposition to Obamacare. The new antithesis is let's just stay with what we have and take care of pre-existing conditions. And guess what's going to happen? A new synthesis. I'm saying that is because these processes occur regardless of what the American people think. For example, the Democrats know that decriminalizing the border is not popular. They also know that providing medical insurance, health insurance for illegal immigrants is not popular. But just as the ideas are not popular today, they are pushing them. Why? Because they're hoping a brand new synthesis will form around their idea of importing socialism into the United States of America.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.